So, moving on to laughter. We'll lighten the mood a bit after
Yes.
that. So, because obviously to me, laughter is very important, and I found myself how cathartic laughter is. I never really realised it until I started doing the process of writing my stand-up and starting to write my one-woman show. So, how important is laughter to you in getting through your tough times?
It's so important. It keeps me sane. It stops me from going to a dark place. I recently have had a health issue that's twitching in my face. It's all fine. It's nothing serious. I've had loads of tests, and I just have this strange spasm. One in 4,000 people in the UK, and I'm one of them, so I'm very special. Thank you very much. But in the midst of that, when I was like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? It could be something awful. My husband sent me a video of his face, because my face twitches when it happens. My husband sent me a video of him pretending to do a twitch and doing a really exaggerated one, and it cracked me up. And every time I got worried about it, I watched that video and thought, do you know what? It's fine. Because laughter just somehow takes you from catastrophizing and from thinking that the worst is going to happen, and it just lightens and it soothes you, and I think it brings your focus back into real life rather than into darkness. So I'm finding more and more, I'm going to more comedy gigs than music gigs, and as you said, I'm a musician, I love music, but there's something about going and laughing until you cry that's so healing. I've had one recently and I laughed until I cried, and then I laughed again, and I'm just like, oh my word. I came out of it like I'd been in like this huge therapy session, and I'd been to a comedy gig, and it was just really, really funny. And I find it so healing. And again, I listen to podcasts, I listen to audiobooks that are funny, because it just keeps you at that level where you don't take yourself too seriously. I have a habit as a recovering people pleaser and a perfectionist of taking myself way too seriously, and it just brings me back to earth, and it's like everything's fine. And I find laughter really grounds me.
Yeah.
I think that's how I'd put it.
That's great. So, was there much laughter at home when you were younger? Or I get the impression it might have been a serious household.
Most of the time it was serious, but my dad was a clown. So he'd do silly things. So, for example, most people wouldn't have this at home. He'd decide to see what happens if he shoved a bead up his nose. He had quite a big nose. Now, normally that's what little kids do. My dad was in his 40s, I would have thought at the time. And it got shoved up, and he was trying to get it out, and obviously the more you try and get it out, it swells. And he was doing, it was a green bead, he was pretending it was a bogey. Ha ha ha, very funny. And it was funny because we were little, but then it got stuck. So he tried to get out with the poetry. My mum was out, by the way. My mum was quite serious. It got stuck up his nose, and the more he tried to get it out, the more it swelled. Long story short, we had to go to A&E, and he said to me, can you pretend it was you? Because I can't say it was me. So I did. So, sorry A&E, I lied. It was me, it was Dad, not me. So we had things like that. He'd also act like a big kid, so we'd climb trees, and so he was a big kid. But yeah, Mum was kind of the serious, more religious, godly one. But we did laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Mainly at Dad, I think.
Yeah.
I think he wanted us to laugh with him, but I think a lot of it was at, because as I say, he was a clown. He built himself a taser. You know, you zap someone and basically they get electric current through their body.
Don't try that at
Don't
home,
try this at
people.
home. Because my dad tried it on himself, and my mum walked into the garage and he was flat out on the floor. Thankfully he was fine, but that was quite a normal, if that's the right word, occurrence in our house, that he'd do something completely off the wall, and we'd all laugh about it. But now as an adult I'm like, actually it's quite traumatic.
Yeah.
and full on. So yeah.
So would you say you inherited his sense of humour?
Yes,
Yeah.
but more risk averse. I think that's
Yeah.
why I'm so risk averse.
Yeah. I think that's probably because you work sort of in risk management. Some
Yes.
elements of it, aren't they? So in health and safety. So
Yeah,
like you walk in somewhere and go, that's not safe. That's not.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that was, living with Dad was just not. But he was lovely. He was very silly as well. So he'd do stuff like, you'd walk in a room and he'd pretend to be asleep or dead, which isn't actually funny, and then jump up and scream at you, so you jump. So yeah, he did. I think it's why I kind of suffer with anxiety as well.
We'll add that to the therapy list.
Exactly.
For the trauma bombs. So who or what makes you laugh the most? Have you got any favourite comedians or styles of comedy?
Yes, I kind of have my two extremes. I love clever humour, and I love when people do wordplay, and I love stories. So like the Sarah Millican, she's one of my favourites. She tells a story, and then by the end of the gig, it's all looped in together. I love stuff like that. But I also love her husband, Gary Delaney, who does one-liners and their puns, and you can't breathe because in between you're laughing your head off. But I'm also a massive fan of slapstick, of very physical humour. And a combination of all of those, I'm like, wow. But I also, and my husband said, don't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, I find myself really funny. Not necessarily when I mean to be funny. It generally is when I don't mean to be funny. So it's definitely a menopause thing. I struggle to find the right word a lot of the time. Right. So far, so good today. So for some reason I was doing a training course and I was trying to think of the word convertible, as in a car, and I couldn't remember, so I called a lifty top car. And I have this whole vocabulary where I've invented words or just used the wrong one, and that makes me laugh, and I think it's really funny, but I didn't think anyone else would. But it makes me laugh, and again, it stops me taking myself too seriously.
Yeah.
Recovering people pleaser and perfectionist, I have a habit of taking myself way too seriously. So being able to laugh at myself when I do silly things, or when I get in a tears, or when I'm getting anxious about something and I don't need to, laughing at myself again brings me out of a potential dark place. So it is a good thing. But my favourite comedians, definitely Sarah Millican. I love Dave Gorman, Joe Lycett, Mary Cross, Russell Kane.
I didn't pay her to say that.
She didn't pay me, but I had to say it. No, but I love your humour because it very much, we have quite similar mums, and a lot of that, it's so relatable. I like relatable humour.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Femme de la Femme events where it's female comics, it's like they're talking what's in your head. I love that. I love that. It's so relatable. And it's stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, but they make it funny. And again, that takes the power out of bad things because it brings them into the light and puts them in perspective again.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we have an equation in comedy that says tragedy plus time equals comedy.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously you don't want to be joking about things that are too raw too soon, but once you do get a bit of perspective on them and you can sort of poke fun at them, and I think, like you say, that's the joy of comedy, when you can sit there and go, oh my god, somebody else does that, somebody else thinks that, I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, and and then when you see everybody else laughing, you think, well, everybody in this room must feel that way as well. So
definitely,
it's definitely a very, as you say, healing experience too. And I think it's really nice. I think it must have been really difficult. Obviously, I didn't start doing comedy till after the pandemic had ended, and I know it was hard for a lot of the comedians doing Zoom gigs to not get that feedback from the audience. And I think you can tell, because I watch a lot of comedy at home and I'll laugh, but I never laugh as much as when I'm actually sat in a group of other people. Yeah. There's something about a shared energy, like a vibration,
definitely,
that you pick up on, and that's another reason why it's so good for you.
Definitely.
So I was reading actually that when you laugh, it releases dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin. Wow. So your endorphins are like you've just been for a run. Dopamine, obviously, your dopamine hit, and then oxytocin's like the love drug as well. So it's scientifically proven to be good for you. So
I love that. But yeah, there's so many gigs I've been to, and you'll laugh at something, and then you'll catch someone's eye, and you'll crack up, or you hear a funny laugh. Loads of people have really funny laughs, and that sets me off, and you'd lose all of that with Zoom. Yeah. You wouldn't have. But there is something about shared experiences anyway, good, bad, indifferent, but funny ones. And the other thing I find funny at comedy gigs, and there was an all-female one that I've been to recently, and women who don't laugh at some of the gigs, at some of the things people say, and you think, oh, does that mean it hasn't happened to them? Or they think they've gone too far, or they don't find, and I always find that quite intriguing, and I'm like, oh, are they just, you know, they're not in the right place to hear someone talking about something that they think's private or personal, or, so I find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I went to a gig with some, I won't say who it was. It was a TV comedian, and one of my friends was actually supporting them, and there's a couple in the front row, and they didn't crack a smile for the whole gig. And I thought, well, you've paid to come and see this specific person, so this isn't just like a general gig, there's 10 people on. They'd paid money to come and see this person. They sat there, and I realised everybody laughs differently. Like my wife doesn't laugh out loud, she laughs, but no sound comes out, so she says, I'm a rubbish audience member for you to take 20 of your gigs. But so I realised that, but I thought, it's weird to pay money to just come and sit and disapprove. And I don't know, sometimes I think people see TV comedians on TV, and then when you see them live, it can be quite shocking. Because I think, were you saying at the Joe Lycett gig, there was a lot of 60-year-old women who'd obviously seen him on the Sewing Bee,
and they were quite shocked. He came out in a pair of floral pyjamas and was calling himself Mummy. He's the most glorious creature in the world. I love him, but you could hear intakes of breath. We nearly all fainted from lack of oxygen. It was like, I was like, who brought my mum to this gig? It was quite shocking. But yeah, that was really funny. And people went at half time.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, if you're that offended, go.
Yeah, fine,
which is okay. But yeah, and he was like, but he realised, because he could see like some of the people, and they were at the front as well, bless them, because we were quite close to the front. And he went, oh, I'm really sorry to all the people who've come because they've seen me on Sewing Bee. This is the real me. And you're like, oh yeah, which was amazing and we all loved. But yeah, it was a bit of a shock.
It's a fine line, isn't it?
It is. Very funny for us though, I must admit.
Yeah, I do quite like watching people who are slightly uncomfortable. And I think if you're ever at a comedy gig and you're near the front row and they see you looking uncomfortable, you're bound to get picked on.
Exactly.
So, just a word to the wise.
Fake laugh.
Yeah, just smile. Now, have you got a favourite joke? I did pre-warn you of this one, so I'm not going to make one up on the spot.
Have, and it's a really sad joke, but I love this joke. What do you call a fish with no eye?
I don't know. It's a classic.
And it makes me laugh like this every single time.
I like that. I like silly jokes. And as you know, I do love a pun. My family are getting a bit wary of my puns. But, yeah.
I love your puns.